In the summer of 1984, before the championships, before the worldwide commercials, before the name Air Jordan signified a global empire, he was just a 21-year-old college player who had yet to set foot on an NBA court. And he was on the verge of going 8-0 against a squad armed with Magic Johnson, Larry Bird, and Isaiah Thomas. This is far more than some forgotten tale in the saga of basketball. This was the exact moment Michael Jordan declared to the entire sport what he was destined to become. And it's a story that has been almost completely silenced by time. This is the chronicle of how a young amateur brought the planet's most dominant players to their knees, and how the fateful decision of one NBA executive to ignore what he witnessed would go down as the most catastrophic draft error in the history of sports. Entering the Olympics, Michael Jordan's list of achievements already dwarfed those of many players he was about to confront. A high school legend and a McDonald's All-American, Jordan committed to the University of North Carolina in 1981, becoming only the fourth freshman in history to start for the legendary Dean Smith. Just 1 year later, on the most colossal stage imaginable, he seized his moment of destiny. In the 1982 NCAA title game versus Georgetown and their own freshman prodigy Patrick Ewing, Jordan delivered 16 points, snatched 9 rebounds, and with only 18 seconds remaining, he calmly drilled a 16-foot shot to clinch the championship, 63-62. By the time he was a sophomore, MJ had been named College Player of the Year by the Sporting News. In his junior year, he not only repeated that honor, but also added the Naismith and Wooden Awards to his growing collection of trophies. Yet that same powerhouse North Carolina team was vanquished by Indiana in the Sweet 16, with a scrappy, little-known defender named Dan Dakich shackling Jordan to a mere 13 points. For just a brief instant, Jordan appeared mortal. He then opted to sacrifice his senior year and unleash his talents upon the NBA. But before he could conquer the world's greatest professionals, he first had to endure one of the most savage tryouts in basketball lore, overseen by a coach who would cut a future Hall of Famer without a second thought. In the spring of 1984, the fearsome Indiana head coach Bob Knight was given the monumental task of forging the United States men's basketball team for the Los Angeles Olympic. Knight summoned 72 of the nation's premier amateur talents to Bloomington for the Olympic trials. This was not the era of the Dream Team. There were no pre-selected superstars, no engraved invitations, and no patiently waiting to see which stars felt compelled to grace the team with their presence. In those days, players who had not yet become professionals were forced to fight and claw for their place on the roster. The country's finest amateurs were assembled, and from that group, only the absolute strongest would remain. Bob Knight was the unforgiving gatekeeper. He was one of the most notorious drill masters the sport had ever seen. Knight guaranteed that no one received special treatment. You weren't given a warm welcome. You reported for duty. Players hauled their own bags, were crammed onto buses, and were treated like raw recruits from the moment they set foot on the grounds. Except this was no ordinary collection of recruits. Over here was Michael Jordan, over there was Charles Barkley, and Patrick Ewing was sitting right up front. The trials stretched from April 17th to April 22nd, where Knight faced the brutal job of cutting dozens of elite athletes down to just 12 plus 2 alternates. The players were quartered in tiny rooms at the Indiana University Student Union. They ate in a packed cafeteria and were ferried about in small vans. Workouts were not held in the Grand Assembly Hall, but in a smaller, bare-bones gymnasium that smelled like a local YMCA. There was zero hospitality, no security, and no personal entourage. Once practice concluded, the players were on their own, left to wander Bloomington, sometimes even accepting rides to the movies from complete strangers. It was the most stripped-down, unglamorous setting imaginable for the most promising young talents in the entire country. And yet, one of them moved as if he already knew precisely how this epic was destined to end. Michael Jordan moved through it all with a brazen self-assurance that broadcast his deep understanding of what awaited him. At the time, he had been deeply conflicted about departing North Carolina. He yearned to stay. His mother begged him to stay, but both his father and Dean Smith guided him toward the NBA, compelling him to secure his livelihood and evade the risk of a devastating injury as an unpaid collegiate athlete. What none of them could have possibly predicted was that his next great ordeal wasn't waiting in the NBA. It was waiting for him in Bloomington. In an age with vastly less media saturation, scouting was far from an exact science, but the name Jordan already resonated with power. Even his most bitter college rivals understood exactly who he was. And despite Bobby Knight being the absolute opposite of a warm, supportive coach, Jordan maintained a strange admiration for him. MJ even made a joke about the contrast between his college coach and his Olympic commander, saying, "I learned the four-corner offense from Coach Smith. I learned the four-letter word from Coach Knight." What truly connected with Jordan was not Knight's abrasive style or his harsh language, It was the man's relentless obsession with absolute perfection. Knight insisted on complete and total submission to his system. Players were commanded to take notes during every single film study. Every day, without fail, he demanded they write a journal entry, detailing how the day unfolded, what their focus was, and what required immediate improvement. And for the elite few who survived to make the team, Knight bestowed upon them a single object, a glossy photograph of an Olympic gold medal. He commanded them, "I want you to place this in the back of your binder. Every day, I want you to sit and invest 5 minutes staring at this photo and to envision what your life is going to become after you have earned this honor." And the practices, they were not friendly scrimmages. They were wars of attrition. The 1984 Olympic tryouts were meant to be a calm process of evaluation, with coaches quietly comparing players and athletes trying to fit in, not stand out. That is not how things transpired. Even with several courts active at once in an empty arena, an undeniable energy shifted whenever Michael Jordan took the floor. It didn't matter what drill you were participating in or who you were defending. Players repeatedly found themselves stealing glances, not because they were disinterested, but because something fundamentally different was occurring on that court. Over 70 elite athletes filled that gym, and every single one of them sensed on a primal level when MJ was playing nearby. You do not need to announce when greatness is present. People can feel it. Bobby Knight felt it too. Early in the process, his directive to Michael was utterly unambiguous. Knight pulled Jordan aside and delivered a stern warning. "I need you to do me a favor. There are going to be instances on this tour when I will verbally tear you apart, and you are going to have to do nothing but stand there and endure it." Michael retorted, "Why do I have to take it?" And the coach's answer was devastatingly simple: "Because everyone else is watching you." If the coach would tear into a talent like Jordan, a chilling message echoed through the gym. No one was safe. Every player would silently wonder, if he's unleashing that on him, what chance do I have? But this was never about humiliating Michael. It was a calculated display of power, a strategic move to leverage the aura of the greatest player in the building to elevate the expectations for everyone. Jordan absorbed the verbal onslaught. He took every harsh critique and did precisely what Knight had gambled he would do with them. In fact, Knight became Jordan's most vocal admirer, openly gushing to the press. "The kid is just an absolutely great kid. If you asked me to name the 3 or 4 most gifted athletes I've ever witnessed on a basketball court, he would be on that list. I think he's the greatest athlete I've ever seen play basketball, period. If I were to compile a list of people with the most phenomenal ability I've ever seen play the game, he'd be there. If I were to single out the fiercest competitors to ever grace the hardwood, he would be among them. So, in the categories of competitiveness, ability, skill, and then athletic ability, he is the pinnacle athlete. He's one of the ultimate competitors. He's one of the most masterful players. That, to me, makes him the single greatest basketball player that I have ever laid eyes on. Dawkins with his quickness. Oh, Michael Jordan just ascends above everybody. That is monumental praise, especially from a coach who had already molded legends like Isaiah Thomas. And still, even at that early stage, no one could measure up to Jordan in Knight's estimation or, as it was becoming clear, in anyone else's. Yet Bob Knight's foresight that summer wasn't perfect. The roster of players he dismissed from the Olympic squad included Karl Malone, Charles Barkley, John Stockton, and Joe Dumars. We're talking multiple future MVPs, an NBA champion, dozens of all-NBA selections players who would come to define an entire era of professional basketball. And yet, the most staggering cut from those tryouts wasn't even a close call. It was Charles Barkley. On the court, Chuck was a force of nature, impossible to overlook. He utterly dominated the scrimmages. He made backboards tremble with his raw power and explosive athleticism. And he was already showing glimpses of something virtually unheard of for a power forward at the time. Genuine playmaking genius. He would grab the rebound and lead the break, reading the floor and generating offense in ways that shattered the confines of his traditional position. But Bob Knight had a different vision. He was obsessed with positional size at the 4 spot. And perhaps even more crucially, he demanded unwavering control. Barkley talked back, frequently, and for Knight, that mattered. As unstoppable as Chuck was between the lines, the dual liability of being undersized for the role Knight envisioned and his refusal to hold his tongue ultimately sealed his fate. It's a decision that, looking back, seems almost insane, knowing the colossal figure Charles Barkley was destined to become. But here is the fascinating twist. Barkley departed those tryouts with zero animosity toward the man who was emerging as the team's undisputed star, because Chuck knew, even then, that he was in the presence of something transcendent. Long before the iconic sneakers, the championship rings, or the global myth. One player was so undeniably superior that even a future Hall of Famer had no choice but to bow to the truth. I had never seen anything like him. Michael is a bit taller than I am. He possesses an unbreakable mental fortitude, and he could flat out outrun everybody and outjump everybody. I have never witnessed anything like it. And remember, this was before he became Michael Jordan. This was in college. I said, Coach, he's gonna be otherworldly. I'm not the best. There's this phenomenal force of nature from North Carolina. Bob Knight was in full agreement. In fact, he was uncharacteristically effusive in his praise about his shooting guard, issuing a stark warning that any NBA franchise foolish enough to pass on Jordan would live to regret it. Knight proclaimed that Jordan's game was tailor-made for the NBA. The Portland Trail Blazers possessed the second pick in the 1984 NBA draft. It was a poorly kept secret that the Houston Rockets were set to select Hakeem Olajuwon at number 1. Knight personally called Portland's general manager, Stu Inman, and implored him to take Jordan next. We need a center. Inman retorted, "Shit," Knight fired back. "Take Jordan and play him at center." The Blazers failed to listen. They selected Kentucky center Sam Bowie. And with that fateful error, the path was cleared for the Chicago Bulls to swoop in and take Michael Jordan with the 3rd pick, igniting the fuse for everything that would follow. And for Portland, that decision, rooted in a narrow-minded focus on positional fit, remains arguably the single most catastrophic blunder in NBA draft history. Chicago Bulls picked Michael Jordan, the University of North Carolina. To prepare Team USA for the 1984 Olympics, the program devised a trial by fire, 8 exhibition games, 8 grueling matchups against reigning NBA All-Stars. This was the stage where amateurs were supposed to be humbled, but it became the very platform where Michael Jordan announced he was more than ready for the next level. The NBA didn't just send a token squad. These rosters were stacked with legends like Magic Johnson, Larry Bird, Isaiah Thomas, James Worthy, Clyde Drexler, Bill Walton, Kevin McHale, Danny Ainge, and Robert Parrish. While not every superstar played in every single game, with some rotating through, the sheer concentration of talent was unmistakable. On paper, this matchup should have been a massacre. Team USA was composed of players who were either still amateurs or had just finished their college careers. Michael Jordan, Patrick Ewing, Chris Mullin, Steve Alford, Vern Fleming, Joe Kleina, John Konchak, Sam Perkins, Alvin, Robertson, Wayman, Tisdale, Jeff Turner, and Leon Wood. This was hardly a collection of nobodies, but they were not seasoned NBA veterans, and they were certainly not all-stars. It made no difference. From the very first tip-off, the NBA veterans found themselves struggling to keep up, especially with Jordan. Reports from the games described the All-Stars as out of condition, incapable of matching the blistering pace and suffocating pressure of the young Olympians. And when the challenge was Michael, there was simply no counter. If defenders attempted to stay in front of him, he would vaporize past them. If they managed to cut off his drive, he would simply defy gravity and soar over them. These exhibition games were more than just warm-ups. They were a chilling prophecy of the storm to come. While Jordan didn't command every single second in the early contests, the bolts of lightning were impossible to ignore. Larry Drew, then a guard for Kansas City, and a man who would later become a long-tenured NBA coach, found himself standing in the path of this emerging force. In their matchup, MJ's final tally was a modest 16 points, but in a game-altering 19-2 surge during the second half, he unleashed a 17-foot dagger, soared for a thunderous dunk, and sank 4 free throws with icy composure. It was more than enough. Jordan backs Johnson in, and right there, you witnessed the phenomenal abilities of Michael Jordan. Drew would later admit, "To be completely candid, I hadn't really heard much about Michael Jordan. We faced them, and I vividly recall phoning my brother right after that game. I told him, there was a phenom playing for this USA team. I just went up against him, and his is a name we are going to hear echoing through the league." But for Jordan, it wasn't enough. He knew he was capable of more, and a perfect stage was waiting for him to prove it. An ocean of over 15,000 fans spilled into the Greensboro Coliseum, many drawn by the promise of seeing former North Carolina Titans like Phil Ford, Walter Davis, James Worthy, and Bobby Jones take the floor for the NBA All-Star squad. What they witnessed instead was the opening salvo of a new era. The Olympians erupted, forging an 8-2 lead in the first 4.5 minutes and effectively ending the contest in the third quarter. Performing in his own backyard, Michael Jordan unleashed a torrent of 25 points, propelling Team USA to a 96-85 demolition of the NBA professionals. In the aftermath, Portland forward Kenny Carr spoke a stark and chilling truth. Michael Jordan makes the team a great team. I shudder to think of the result if he weren't on their side. And as the tour reached its climax, Jordan left no doubt as to who owned the moment. A supremely gifted defensive player, Michael Jordan, what an astounding play, executed a beautiful against another NBA All-Star roster. He unleashed a 27-point barrage in an 84-72 victory, preserving Team USA's immaculate exhibition record. He accomplished it with cold-blooded efficiency, 9 successful shots on 14 field goal attempts and converting 9 of 12 from the charity stripe. Against seasoned professionals on the tour's final battleground, Jordan did not merely compete, he hammered home a thunderous exclamation point on the entire affair. Baseline, he has it locked high. Phil Hubbard, who also tasted that early fury during the scrimmages, would later watch his own NBA career be extinguished by Michael Jordan's will. When Jordan defied gravity to hit the series-clinching shot against Cleveland in the 1989 playoffs, he feeds it to Jordan. Jordan drives to the circle, unleashes the shot. It's good! The game is over, and the Bulls have won! Hubbard reflected, playing against him with Team USA, you received the first true premonition that he was destined for greatness. But I doubt a single soul could have fathomed just how great. It was clear his entire arsenal was engineered for the NBA, and he was capable of executing plays that defied belief. He absolutely put on a clinic out there. Team USA concluded its exhibition tour with a perfect record of 8 wins and 0 losses against the NBA's elite. They were forged and ready for the Olympics. But Michael Jordan had revealed a different, more terrifying truth. He was ready for the NBA. The crazy dude from North Carolina, as Charles Barkley had dubbed him, went on to command Team USA at the 1984 Los Angeles Olympics. Jordan led the team's scoring assault with 17.1 points per game, while simultaneously shackling the most dangerous perimeter threats on defense. The US remained unbeaten 8-0, averaging a dominant 95.4 points per contest, while suffocating their opponents to a mere 63.3. Jordan streaks off the opening jump ball. The man is simply unreal. The closest any opponent came was an 11-point victory over West Germany in the quarterfinals, on one of the planet's most revered stages. With a team assembled in just a few weeks, a 21-year-old, fresh from the collegiate world, looked like the future of basketball itself. I honestly believe the man could get his elbow above the top of the backboard. Billy Jordan's Olympic coronation and the decimation of NBA veterans that came before it left the Chicago Bulls euphoric about their draft pick and put the entire league on high alert. That gold medal roster, mentored by Bob Knight and a Hall of Fame staff, was a crucible of talent, featuring 11 future NBA first-round selections and 3 future Naismith Basketball Hall of Fame inductees. One of them was a 21-year-old phenom named Michael Jordan, and his reign of dominance was only just beginning. Everyone knows the legend he became in the NBA, but what is often forgotten is that MJ began his conquest before the NBA, at 21 years old, against the most formidable players on earth, armed with nothing but a college resume and an unbreakable faith in his own destiny. Considering what Jordan did to seasoned NBA All-Stars before he even became a professional, do you believe the league still failed to grasp the magnitude of the force that was about to be unleashed upon it? If you found this story compelling, hit the like button, subscribe for more tales from the MJ saga, and select one of the videos now appearing on your screen.